Hello, my front-end friends. Bento grids, like you can see right now on the screen, are just all over the place these days. And so when I saw the Challenge by Frontend mentor that recently came out that had a bento grid on it, which you can see right now on the screen, I said, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity to dive in and explore creating bento grids. So yeah, that's what this video is going to be all about, and it's creating this design that we see right here. So the challenge to the Frontend mentor project is down below if you'd like to follow along and do it all through there, submit your challenge in Frontend mentor and everything else. Or if you'd prefer to follow along with where I'm going to be starting from, because I have a little bit of stuff already sort of setting the stage for us so we can focus mostly on the grid itself, then there is a GitHub repo down below that has the exact starting point that I have for this video, as well as my finished code. And for this one, we're going to be building out the desktop version, as well as making sure that it's responsive. We have this mobile one here, and we'll also, along the way, try and figure out what goes in the middle. And we're going to be talking about a lot of important things, like the order of things, because the order here, if you look at this one down here, actually ends up, or let's split this off to the right, actually, and then look at the desktop design here. You can see this one that's right here actually goes as the first thing over here. So we'll look at changing the order. We're going to look at setting the colors on these, and a unique approach a little bit that I take to bento grids versus other types of grids, and maybe some of the downsides of how I'm going to set this up, just because I do feel like bento grids have a little bit of a unique approach that you do need to take to them compared to other types of grids, because of the ordering and the way things work. So yeah, that's what we're going to be focused on in this video. If you are following along with me, I did set this up using Vite. So if you come in and do an npm I just to install all the dependencies, and then you can do an npm run dev, and that will start up the development server. If you'd prefer to use something like live server, that's completely fine if you've never used npm before. And if you've never used npm before and you'd like to, there is a link down in the description below where I have an npm for absolute beginners video that you could always check out once you're done here. I'm just going to control click on that, which is going to open it in Chrome for me. So we can see right here is what we're going to be starting with. And we're going to break down a little bit of my starting styles and the starting HTML here to dive into this. And we're going to start with the mobile version of it. So I'm going to move that on over, shrink this over, close this because we don't need it. And we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the decisions that I made along the way here, where we have all the divs, or each one of these is just a div, nothing too fancy. And then in each one of them, there's a heading. Most of them have an image, if not all of them, and a little bit of text. The one thing you'll notice is, say in this second one here, you'll notice my H2 is first, and then my image is here. We'll talk more about that on why I made that decision when we come to making that actually happen. But just so you know, the order of things might not be exactly the same, and we'll be fixing that as we go through and do everything. But yeah, nothing too fancy, just divs with headings on all of these. So there we go. That's set up. The HTML is very straightforward for this type of thing. And these styles, once again, you'll see some styles are already in place here because I've set up the font face to have the right font families coming in. I have the custom properties here that I'm going to be using throughout the project that just have all the colors that we're going to be using, as well as a few different font sizes that are right here, and a general reset and I'm using a layer for this. If you've never seen layers before, it's just a way that we can organize our CSS a little bit. And of course, if you've never used them before and you'd like to learn more about them, it is something I have covered as well. So once again, link in the description, maybe even a fancy little card popping up top. And yeah, the reset is just getting rid of margins on things we don't want, setting my font weights, making sure my images don't overflow. Some basic stylings here coming in, setting some the font family, setting the colors and a background color on the body. And I have this visually first utility that I'm not sure we're actually going to use it, but I put it in here just in case we do want. And then I have a layer of layout here, which is where we're going to be doing all of our work for our .bento grid. And the first thing we want on that, of course, is a display of grid. And there we go, it's a grid now. Awesome, right? The other thing we want is a gap on this. So I'm going to say gap. I don't know the actual measurements from this because I'm just basing it on the JPEG. I could measure everything, but just eyeballing it, it came out to something that looked like it was about 24 pixels. So I'm going to do roughly that. We can always adjust it as we're going through. And the other thing with that is we can't really see the spacing right, just because of the background color. We don't have one set on any of these right now. And you do have a couple of choices on what you could do at this point on how you want to do this. And I'm going to do it in a very specific way that I would probably only take for a bento grid. And potentially you don't want to work this way. Maybe you'd prefer to have a class of card on every one of these. It's definitely a choice that you can make. If this was part of a bigger project and this type of thing was being used in other places than the Bento, then I probably would have a class that I would want on all of them. In this case, I'm just going to assume that this is the only place, this layout, and this styling is there because it gives me an opportunity to talk about another approach we can do, which is just selecting all the direct children of my Bento grid. And now we can say something like background color of red, and they all get red on them. So now we can at least see these items, which is what we want. Now, one of the important things in here, if we take a look at all the styling in here, the background colors change. We have 3 or 4 different background colors we're going to be cycling through. The padding of them changes. Like this top one definitely has more padding. The font sizes, even though I put H2 where I did an H1 for the first one, but then like the H2s here, some of them are larger. Like this 56 is definitely bigger than this one, which those might be the same, but this one is, I think, bigger than this one. Anyway, we have several different font sizes coming in here. And so whether you're doing it through this approach or you just have a more generic .card class or something like that, you could take this exact same approach in either way that you might want to do things. The way I'm going to do this though is I want to set a default that is very easy to override. And I don't want to take the utility class approach. That is perfectly fine. If you'd rather just create utility classes for all these different combinations, you could definitely do that as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that we have a var of Bento card. And again, if you were doing this as a more generic card, it could just be a card like this. And we're going to do surface. If you prefer background or BG for your background color, that's fine too. I've come to calling my backgrounds surfaces. So I'm going to say my Bento card surface. And if I do that, we don't have one because Bento card surface doesn't exist as a variable anywhere. What we could do here is give that a fallback of red. I don't want red, but just show you that by doing that, because this doesn't exist, we're using the fallback here, but I would rather use an existing color that I would want in here. And all of them are used twice except for the light yellow, which is only used once. So I'm just going to say that like my generic one here, or my default will be my white one. So I do have the var of white that's there, and we should see it a little bit. Might be hard to see, but the background is an off-white, and then we have this white coming on those cards. And the other thing we want is some padding, but I mentioned the padding here looks definitely bigger than say the padding here. So like if you look at the space on the top versus the space here. So I'm going to take the same approach for a lot of the things we're doing here. I'm going to say the same for my padding. Padding is my var Bento card padding, comma, and then I could put a value in here. I don't have any custom properties for spacing, so we could just say 2 rem, or you could say this could also be like 32 pixels, whatever value you'd want to give. And just in case it is hard to see, let's just put the red back so we can see. If I turn that off and then we turn it back on, we can see that padding is using this fallback value. And as we'll see later on, it's going to be very easy to overwrite these where we need to. I'm pretty sure all of them have the same border radius, but because I'm taking this approach, I like just going all in with this type of approach. So I'm also going to come in here and say the border radius is my var Bento card border radius. And then we'll do a comma. And again, I'm just sort of eyeballing things based off of the design, but it looks like it's roughly 21 pixels. So we'll come in with that right there. And I'm going to change this back away from the red now that we have that set up with my white. And the last one is we don't normally need to, but on a couple of these, we do need to also change the color of the text. So we can also come in and say that the color is my var, you guessed it, Bento card. I'm going to call it foreground because again, that's just how I'm naming things. If you'd rather name it text or color or whatever you want, you can definitely go with that approach as well. And this will be my var of black, which is the dark black color we have, which doesn't actually change anything at this point. Now I actually have a lot more styling that I want to put on these because we do have some different layouts that come into things, especially when we get to desktop. One of them becomes like 2 columns, and there's a little bit more when it comes to the spacing between elements and some other stuff here. But let's just get sort of the bones put in place, and then we'll come back into this if we see adjustments that do need to start being made. And then, so speaking of making some of these changes, let's come in and start making those. And this is where, because it's a Bento grid, I'm taking this approach. But again, if you'd want to use utility classes for these, you can, but we're going to have to select every child in a very specific way when we get to the desktop. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say my Bento grid and direct child, and I'm going to say nth child 1 to select the first one. To me, this is when it comes to Bento grids where we have to be very specific about where things are placed. This is the easiest way to do it instead of like class of Bento grid card 1, Bento grid card 2, or I don't know what we would do. So I just find this is the easiest way. And because And this one, we actually need to invert these colors right here. We can say that my Bento card foreground is going to be my var white, and my Bento card surface is going to be my var of purple, right? I don't know what I called it. Let's try purple. I didn't think that would work. I forgot my name. It is my primary base. So we can jump back down to there, and that would be my primary base. Hit save. There we go. Much better. Cool. So that is already off to a good start, but we have two problems that have come up. One of them is the color of the ×10, which we need to change. And you might be going, well, that's a perfect use case for a utility class. And it could be, but I still want to show this other way that we could work. And I also need to change the font size here, and we need all the text to be aligned in the center as well. And so for that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come out and I'm going to go to my base layer for this, where I'm going to come in and we can do like H1, H2, H3, something like that. And what I'm going to do is the first selector here I'm going to do, we wouldn't really need, but I'm going to do my color of var heading color. And I'm just going to say inherit as the fallback. Inherit. You got to spell it right, which isn't going to change anything. This would be very dependent on the project you're working on. In this case, it makes sense because if I had a specific color, that all my headings are always red except in certain specific situations. This just makes it very easy to modify it. But in this case, I think the inherit works. Again, depending when you have a larger design to base it on, you can make different decisions here. And we can also say that our font size is my var heading font size. And I'm just going to say, in this case, it's my var font size. We'll say LG as a default. So you can see they all get quite big. Let's actually do a font size of maybe an MD here instead, just so we can see the changes that are being made. And I'm also going to say the line height here is maybe a 1.1, just with the larger font sizes. We usually want smaller levels there. Again, if this was a bigger project, I'm sorry I'm being repetitive, but I might have a different fallback value for my H1 compared to my H2 or something like that, and my H3. But on this one, we don't even have an H3 in here. I'm just putting it there for demo purposes. But yeah, we'll get rid of it. But you could, again, hopefully the idea here is just to expand on a bit of a different way that we can work on things. Cool. So that means here in my Bento grid, my nth child 1, that's going to be pretty good, but I can then just come in here and say that my heading, we'll do heading, no, the color is fine. We're going to say that the heading font size is my var, and then we can say that it's my font size XL, and now we can see that one's gotten much bigger. Cool, right? So it becomes very easy to customize these where we want them to. And even for here, if we come and take a look at this, I did wrap a span around this. We could find other ways of doing this, but I think at this point, I could just come into here and say span, and maybe even we could be specific with like my H1 span if you wanted to. I'm being quite specific here, so I'm okay with this. And I'm going to say that the color is my var of accent base, I believe is correct. And there we go. It's actually changed on over. If you haven't used nesting before, be very careful when you use nesting. But this is essentially the same thing as saying nth child 1 span. And so this selector is the same as this because this is nested inside of there. This would select any span that's potentially, it's just a general descendant selector, so you do want to be a little bit careful with it, but I'm being very specific in how I'm using this, so I think it's safe to do it this way. But yeah, that's how I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that's looking pretty good, and I'm happy with the customization I was able to do, but I need some additional stuff here, right? Like I need my text align to be centered, which is different from over here. I need the layout changes a little bit. My image max width needs to be contained a little bit, and some other things. And this is where we could just go very specific, like here where I'm targeting the specific span, or I could be more generic. And in this case, I want to be more generic. Maybe I could even open up this span potentially in the same way, but it's the only, we have another span down there. We're going to do it the same for, we're going to, instead of having to select the spans here, we're going to make things just very controlled through custom properties like this. What I'm actually going to do, let's take this span that's right here, and we're going to come in and say that this span would come here. And once again, we're going to use a fallback. So we're going to say var, we'll wrap this whole thing in our var, and we're going to say that my Bento span, or we'll call it, should we call it, I'm trying to think if we should call it heading span or if it should, because we only have them changing in the headings. I'm going to call it Bento. Do we just even do as a heading span? And this could be something. I'm doing it here. I think we're actually going to change this a little bit, but we're going to call this one heading span. And I'm going to do a comma and have the base just yellow. Seems like a nice fallback. And I apologize, I had this whole thing planned in a lot of detail, but this one just caught my eye as a potential change we could make. So I'm actually going to cut this from here. So we're going to remove it from being as part of the Bento grid. I'm going to bring that up over here to my headings. And this is going to make it a bit more specific. When we're styling these spans, we know if I use a heading span, it's only going to change the span that's in the heading that I've selected. And I think that makes a little bit more sense. So my heading span gets the accent base. And just to show that this, let's just put black here as the default. We can see it's coming in as black now. So it's using the fallback that's here. I'm going to leave it as black for the demo, just so I can come on in my nth child 1. And then here we could also do our heading span. I guess it should have been color, or because I have foreground, we'll go with foreground. And this will be my accent base. And let's just fix that. Heading span foreground. We don't have a background. And I just realized I'm being a bit inconsistent, so I'm also going to change my heading to be using foreground here as well, just so we have foregrounds and padding everywhere. Heading font size, heading span foreground. There we go. I'm happy with that. I think we're nice and consistent with that. The other thing we're going to do now is come on this. This is sort of my coloring looks, and then I also want to be able to open up my layout a little bit. So I'm just going to put an extra white space here just to move into like layout land. This is just how I like to write my CSS, but we're going to do a display of grid right here. And we don't necessarily have to use grid, but I think it's the easiest one to use for what we're going to be doing here. I'm going to do a gap, and we're going to do a var of Bento card gap. Because I'm doing this specifically for the cards, I don't want this on the grid itself. This could also be a custom property of Bento grid gap if you wanted to. I'm going to say that's my Bento card gap, and we'll give it a fallback of, I don't know, 32 pixels to have a decent amount of space between our elements like this. Then we could also come in here and say that we have an align content, which is going to be my var of Bento card. Align content works vertically, so I'm going to call this one vertical alignment. And we'll worry about the fallbacks for this in a second, but I'm also going to do a justify items, which would be my var Bento card horizontal alignment. And if you get confused with align content and justify items and justify content and align items, especially in the grid context, I have covered that in a previous video too. So once again, the link to that will be in the description down below. Now for both of these, the default I'm going to put, and I'll just multi-place my cursor by pushing Alt there and do a comma, and I'm going to put start. And if you're on Mac, it would probably be an option. So I'm going to put start there and nothing would change. Just for fun, if we change both of these starts to center, you're going to see that at least this shifted over and is now centered. We'll talk more about a little bit how this works. If we have any single lines of text, those single lines of text will be centered. That appears to be the only one, so it's the only place that we're actually seeing that change. But we'll see this in action a little bit more in a second. And actually, for that, for the justify items, what's happening is it's going to center something that's smaller. But if we have a justify items of center, it means we want to center the items horizontally. Anytime we have like this image is centered, or if we take a look here where this text is centered and then this is centered. So anytime we do have the centering going on, we also want the text alignment to be centered. So we can say that the text align is the same as our var Bento card horizontal alignment. And the default will also be start, because start and end, if I do end, it is going to go over to the end. That's a logical property for the start and end. We can use that now instead of left and right. So in doing this, let's keep start there, but then I can go on this first one and I can say that my Bento card horizontal alignment is now center, and everything would go in the center. Or I could choose end and everything will move on over to the end. So by combining those two together, I think it's a nice little trick there to take advantage of how those work. So that's kind of cool. And actually we want center on this one, so that works out pretty well. Another problem is my image is too big in this case. And every image has sort of a max width that's set on them, but it's different on every single one of the cards, which is a little bit annoying that we have that, because in all of these, you can see they're stretching the full size, and I don't want them to be doing that. So another thing that we could do here is in my Bento grid, I'm going to come right here actually and say Bento grid image is going to be a max width of var Bento card image width, and we'll just put 100% as the default. I'm trying to think if I want that as a max width or a width. Actually, we might want to have it, this should be a comma here, as the fallback. I'm going to do that for my width and my max width, just so sometimes, because on most resets you will have something like this. And it is possible we need some images to get bigger than 100% as a max width. So this is just going to be if we set a specific size on the image by having the one custom property for both of these, it's going to make sure we can get bigger than 100% if ever we need to. Not sure if we'll need to, but for this very specific use case, I think we'll be safe doing this. And the last thing I'm going to do is also put in an order. I'm going to say order is my var Bento card image order, and we won't put a default on that just because I don't want to set orders on images unless I need them. And the last thing while we're here and just setting up the customization, earlier on I mentioned the padding is different on that first one, and it might change through some of the other ones as well. Oh, we have the Bento card padding. I didn't think we'd set that up there. We do have it, so I can come on this one and I can actually say that my Bento card padding on this one is bigger. Let's go up to 64 pixels and see what that looks like. And that's probably too big now, but it's not too bad. Maybe a 48 will be a bit better. And the size here is a little bit off. So if I make that a bit bigger, we're sort of falling into... I'm actually, one last thing, just because I see here it's 10 times faster with AI, and they're on the same line, but this is wider, and we could play with the padding a ton to try and like force that to happen. So here it's actually looking pretty good, but I'm going to come up to my reset, and on these two headings anyway, I'm going to do one last thing, which is a text wrap of balance. And that should prevent it from doing that thing where that one line of AI was by itself. So it's matching the design a little bit better. Perfect. So I'm super happy with that. I think we have most things in place. We might find something else as we go through this. It was definitely a lot of work setting it all up to this point, but we're going to see now as I go through all of these, it should go relatively quickly, though we'll need to see a few tricks along the way. And of course, there's the ordering of all our cards that's going to come into it as well. And before we do go and move on to some of these other ones, right now this image is way too big. So we did create this max width and width feature we can use here. So I'm going to say my Bento card image width is something like, I don't know, 70% range or something like that. And that looks better. And the reason it's centered is this nice horizontal alignment that we have there. It's just making it so it goes right in the middle. We could probably tweak the spacing on this one because you can see here the spacing's not equal. I did use gap for this. Maybe my gap is actually a little bit too big on this one, but it will be based on how I did this. We won't get the exact same spacing, but we'll do a Bento card gap of, I don't know, we can try something like that. It's close enough for me. If you'd want, you could customize the margin specifically for, I suppose, the image on this one. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that one's looking. So let's come into this one. So that will be my, let's just copy this selector that we have right here. We have our nth child 2. And for this one, we can see that I actually want the image to be on top. So I'm going to say that my Bento card image order is going to be a -1, which will pull it up. And there's a bit of a thing here where if I zoom in on this, you'll notice there's shadows on it. And this one, the shadow is actually part of the image that came in, but it was clipped a little bit. I would actually say that if this was the real world and you're working with a designer, like tell them the asset's a little bit mucked. In this case, there was a little bit of a problem with the asset. So if ever you're in this situation, there is a way that we can fix that up. So we're going to look at that. It's a little bit of a hacky solution and it's not perfect, but in this case, and I wouldn't normally do this, like we could even do a fixing shadow issue in asset or something like that to tackle this, where we can select the image that's directly in there. And I'm going to add a filter on here of a drop shadow. And we're going to do 0, 0, 1 rem. and a black color. So HSL 0%, 0% would be pure black. And if I do that, it's gonna be way too dark, but I'm gonna leave it too dark for a minute just to show you. And when it's too dark like this, it's actually doesn't look terrible because we're hiding the issue. The reason, just really fast, if you haven't seen a drop shadow before, I'm doing this instead of a box shadow, which you're probably more familiar with, of 0, 0, 1 rem. And I'll just copy this to go a little bit faster. And let's comment out this line. And if it's a box shadow, because it's an image, it's putting it on the image's box, but the image has transparency in it. And if you have an image with transparency, a drop shadow uses that transparency. So we're only adding it to the parts of the image that aren't transparent, which is what we want. So we'll just come here and add a little bit of transparency just to lighten it up. You will see a little bit of that issue of it coming through, especially here, which we can fix. But here too, you get it a little bit, but it's really not that bad and not very noticeable. And to get rid of it in this corner, let's just make this a bit darker so we can see it. So yeah, where this corner is, where you can sort of see the corner coming in, that just means we can come and do a border radius of 100 VW, or just any very big number. And now the border image actually follows the shape of the image, so we don't have that weird glitchy thing. And if there was any issues on this side, we'd be removing it too. So the only spot where there's any problems is right here. So I'm just going to lower the opacity on that to bring it a little bit lower down and match the design a bit more. And you can definitely see there's a little bit of an issue here, but yeah, we're going to come in with something like that just to try and hide that away and hope nobody notices. So there we go. Perfect. So that one's good. And just really fast on why I'm using the image order here. And you could also do this with like that utility class that I did the visually first to pull things up. Is just, if you're thinking of it, like if you came across something, you'd probably normally get a title and then information, you know, something that goes with that title. And normally when you have a heading, this heading's creating sort of a part of the document structure. And this image, if I left it here, even though this is part of this div, from the document structure point of view, this image would actually be associated more over here, and it wouldn't fall under this that's right here. Same thing, if I put this image on top here, this image would be associated from the document structure point of view to this H2 that's right here, not the H2 that comes after it, even though they're supposed to be related. So it makes more sense to put the image here and then just visually change the order. And it's one of the few times where visually changing the order I think is completely fine. The other thing really fast with my images, I have left blank alts on all of them just because I do see them basically everywhere here as decorative elements. I don't think they're adding any importance. Like maintain a consistent posting schedule and then like a calendar. Like the calendar's not adding anything. It's just visually it gives us an idea that okay, it has to do with what I have there. It adds visual interest when we're looking at the layout, but it doesn't add context and it doesn't add importance. It's not an actual part of the UI of the product that's trying to be sold or anything like that. So I think having blank alts in this case is completely fine, just indicating that all of these are actually decorative. If you think they should have alts, by all means in yours, go ahead or leave a comment down below and let me know why you think they should actually have alts on them, or if there's some of these that you think should and some of them that you don't. Let me know there as well. So cool. Let's keep on going with this. So the next one here is our third one. So for that, once again, we'll copy this selector just to speed things up. Hopefully now we start seeing things come together really fast, because now we can say that my Bento card surface is my var accent base. And we get the color we want on there. And the only other thing with this one, as we can see in the layout over here, is it's actually touching the bottom, and here it's not because we have padding. So how can we fix that? And this is where you could run into some potential issues. First of all, even with the coloring of this, like if I change the order of my elements in the Bento grid, it could potentially impact things. But because Bento grids tend to have very specific things in specific parts on them, and we'll talk more about that with the ordering of things when we get there, I feel pretty comfortable just coming in here and saying that the image has a margin bottom. And if we compare what we have here to what we have down here, you can see it's like way down. So I'm just going to come in with like a negative 150 pixels to really pull it quite far down. Now it's actually overflowing at the bottom. As you can see, it's sticking out from where it was. That actually might be a bit too much, maybe 125. I'm just trying to line up this. Actually, this is as we resize things, it might change this anyway. Let's start here and we'll play with it a little bit after maybe, once we start resizing things. But it does mean that on our Bento grid, the direct children here, I'm also going to come here and just do an overflow of clip. I tend to prefer clip over hidden these days, just because you don't run into any extra scroll bars if you only are doing it in one direction versus the other. There's a few differences, so I'll put a link to the MDM article on clip. If you need to worry about the content that's hidden away, it behaves a little bit differently than hidden, but clip has become sort of my new default, and if I find I run into a problem because of it, then I'll use the overflow hidden instead. But for the most part, I find using clip is very safe. So yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And just if I resize this, the image is, you can see the image changes size as things change. So, you know, the sizing here, you could play around with it a little bit, but I am just doing a negative margin on here instead of doing like a translate or anything like that, because I actually want it to reduce the amount of physical space that it's taking up. So it's one of the times I will use a negative margin, which isn't too often, but in this case I will. And I'm just noticing one thing now as well. I'm just trying to get a number that sort of lines it up with the bottom of these, even though, as we said, it's in this case, actually, it's very magic numbery, but I also just realized something, that my image's size should be a bit different. So in this case, it's my Bento card image width. And we could also apply this directly to the image too, since we have this selector here. Either way would work perfectly fine, but the width, which is probably going to muck up my margin bottom that I have, is something like, if we look here, let's just zoom out a little bit, I don't know, 65%? 65%. And there we go. Actually, that looks pretty good. Again, maybe we could play around with these numbers all day long. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. It probably needs to be a bit wider than this, actually. So anyway, different results. So you can play with that all day long, but that's getting me pretty close to what I want. The next one is this one down here. So we'll copy you once again, drop in the 4 here. And we're going to say that the Bento card surface is my var. In this case, it's not accent, it's my primary light. It's not light, it is subdued, is what we actually wanted. There we go. That looks better. I think my cards are also too close together. But that actually looks pretty good. We have the full size card here. My padding potentially could be reduced. But I think it looks pretty good. I just realized this one, the font size looks pretty good, I think. And this one might, they look the same, but here they look like they should be different. I don't know. I'm not going to worry too much about the font sizes yet. We do probably need to change it on one. But I am seeing that this is centered here and the text at the top is definitely centered. So that would be my Bento card horizontal alignment is center. And that will shift everything over and center them. My font size on my body might actually be a little bit off too, now that I'm looking at that. So we could always fix that after, but I think let's go take a look at that now actually. That would be my font size regular. Let's go look at this one. Even here, it's too small. Should have recognized that when we were there. Let's just make this like a 1.75. That's probably going to be closer to what we wanted. Let's just go look here. Yeah, I think that's probably closer to what we actually want. If we look there, looks much better. The line height would probably be pulled in a little bit as well. Maybe even the 1.43, something like that. This is very specific for this project. And I don't know if these numbers would work if this was in a bigger one, but we'll stick with that. There we go. The next one now, because that one came together nice and quickly, we can come down to the 5th card. We have 8 of these, but at this point it's going pretty fast. The 5th card should be the dark purple, so let's just copy you. And this would be my base. And the color itself, so my Bento card foreground would be my var white. I got to spell foreground correctly. There we go. And once again, we have the alignment is centered. So we can just drop that in there, centering that. And my image width is also too big. So let's copy this right here, drop it here. Cool. And the image order is also different. So Bento card image order goes to a -1. And you see how it just becomes these like piecemeal things. Like we've added all these controls to these Bento cards. So now we just toggle these switches and do what we want with each one of them, which is kind of fun. Next up, we have the sixth one. So we'll continue the trend of copying and pasting to make hopefully this not last too long. We'll make that our sixth one right there. And for this one, if we take a look at it, I guess the first thing we should do is come in with our, in this case, it was just our heading font size, I think, right? If I just do 3rem for fun. Yeah, it was that. So I can say var font size XL probably to get the nice big 56 coming in. But then of course the rest of this needs to be smaller. And if I go and take a look here, I have a span around all of that already. So we want to select that span. If this is something that you think you'd need more fine-tuned control over, again, we could move up some of these to here. We can do them all here. We could say that the display is a var heading span display with the default being an inline, just so it keeps the default, and being the default, we don't technically need to put anything, but I'll put a inline here. And then we also have the font size here will be a var of heading span font size. And that can have a default as well. I think once again, just an inherit or not putting a font, we don't need the inline or the inherit here if you don't want them, because that's what they're already doing. I'll put it anyway, but it's really up to you if you don't want to bother with them. The nice thing with this is then you don't need to have any of these extra selectors in here. You're just doing all of the controls right here on the element itself, right? So we can say that our heading span display is a block, just so it goes on its own line, because we want these to be separate from each other. Then we can say that the heading span font size is my var font size reg, and it goes to that font size. It's right there. Potentially we'd have to change the line height here, I guess, to space them out a little bit more, but I actually prefer mine, so I'm gonna leave it. It's up to you if you want to be a bit more specific on that. And I'm also gonna say that I guess we'll do an extra line here to separate the heading from the Bento card styling. And so the Bento card image width will be, I don't know, 65%. And I'm putting percentages here just because I think it makes sense for it to grow with the card. But if you want specific values, of course, you could just put in absolute values here and that would work fine. And I think I'll just drop it down to a 60, and I'm happy with where that is right now. And we'll come down to this next one that's right here. So that's our 7. Bento card nth child 7. We want that to close off here. And then for this one, we need the Bento card surface to be my var accent subdued. Awesome. And just the font size, or the image size, is a little bit different on this one as well. So we can come in. That actually looks pretty good. Oh, and we have the span that's going to be changed as well. Bento card span. No, not Bento card. This is just our heading span foreground with an E. Foreground is my var primary base. And that's not changing things because I probably don't have create quicker should be in a span. I do apologize for that. Your version of this HTML will include the span there. There we go. So we open up, we get that coming on there. That looks a little bit better. And actually, just because normally I wouldn't include it, but the period here is also purple. So we'll include that there. And of course, then we have the italic coming on. Whether you'd want this to be included as this, but I mean, we've gone all in with this already. So then we can just say that the font style is my var heading span style. And that would be normal, I think, is the default. Again, we don't need to include the default values because they're already the defaults by default. But we'll put it there anyway. And then I'll come and say my heading span style is italic. And I wasn't sure if style was the right word because I very rarely set that individually, but it was the right one when we have our italic text there. And last but not least, look at that. There's a few fun things left to do, but we have this one coming in. So let's get this one, which is our 8th one. And then we have our Bento card surface of var primary base. And that should be my accent base instead. And then we just want to set a maximum size on that image of, say, 70% or something. I also realize the line break is happening at a different point here. That's just because of the text wrap balance. I'm not going to stress too much about that, just because it would be annoying to try and play with that. And I'm going to leave it like this. Cool. So that is done. And we're going to jump up over and get to the complicated and fun stuff now of controlling the order and organizing all of this. So for this, I'm actually going to rearrange things a little bit. Let's bring this down to the bottom here, just so I can still see the layout, even though if it's going to be kind of small. And I want to shrink this all the way down this way and bring this all the way big this way. And things got really big, right? Because the images are based in percentages right now, and they're getting gigantic. And this could be a cause for concern, except I know I'm actually going to be putting them all in a grid, and they're never actually going to get this big. So I'm really not going to stress about that at all. What we're going to do is go back up to our original selector of our Bento grid right here. And what I want to do now is start creating the grid. And to do that, I have to pick a breakpoint, and it can be hard to decide what that breakpoint is actually going to be. There's a few things actually we can do before we even worry about that. I am going to say that it has a margin inline of auto, and we can come in with a max inline size, which is like doing a max width, just using the logical property. And I'm going to say something like 1200 pixels, just because I think that's roughly what we have there. So this should be, once we get to the really big sizes, that it stops it from growing and getting even bigger. So I'm happy with that. And then we have to decide where our grid is going to come in. A number for this that I often use is 960, and then I go from there just to see. So I'm going to do my media with a width that is greater than 960. I am using the range syntax here. We're using nesting and a few other things, so I might as well use my range syntax with this as well. It's a little bit cleaner and easier to read in my opinion. And for this, just really fast to make sure this is working, we can say grid template columns 1FR 1FR. I'm not going to do this, but it just lets us sort of see where this is clicking in. And so this is as big as they're going to get. And we might want to adjust this, but we're going to go down to 4 columns. So we might have to, we only have the 1 column layout and the 4 column layout. So we might need to adjust things a little bit from there as well, but we'll stick with this one for now, and then we'll find the middle ground if we feel like we need it. The other thing is I'm going to do this as 4 columns. So if we look down here, we have 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns. So for me, the simplest way to do this isn't actually to declare your columns or your rows, but just to do grid template areas, because we're going to need these anyway. So grid template areas, or for me, the easiest way to do it is with my grid template areas. And I'm just going to write the number of each one. And to do this, I would look here and figure out which one is which. So this one here is the first one there, and this is our 7th one. So I can just say this is my 7. Then if I look at this one, I know that's my first one. So the first one is going across the first column and going across the second column. So I can say 1, 1. And then I have this one over here. That one is our 1, 2, 3, 4th one. So 7, 1, 1, 4. And then I come on to the next line. The next one is also this, because we can see this is overlapping these two here. So I need 7 is going to go over another column. Then we have this one here, which is our second one. If we come and take a look, that's this one here is going right there. So this is our 2. Then we have the next one, which is this one. So that makes it easy. They're actually in order. And then the 4th one overlaps with those right there because it's using the row. So this would also be my 4. Next up, we have this one that's right here. So this one here would be our 8. So we can say that one is our 8. Our 2 is overlapping with that row, so we can say 2 again. Our 3 is the same, so we can do that again. And our 4 does need to stretch down all the way to the bottom of that one, so we can do 4 right there. And then we have this one going all the way down, so we can say that's 8 once again. We have this one, we haven't seen that one yet. That one's right here, so that would be my 6th one. Then we've covered everything except 5, so this one must be 5. And the 5 stretches across both of them right here, so we would do 5, 5. Like that. And that means we actually, if we come and look in our dev tools, if I look in my main and I turn this on, we should see when we get to here, we have all of those columns showing up. The problem is nothing's actually going in the columns we want them to. And I want to assign all of these to their columns. Not columns, but their areas, I should say. And potentially you could run into issues here when you do this if you don't have any areas declined at smaller sizes. So I am going to say that my grid template areas as a default is going to look very simple. Is this going to be a 1? And I'm going to go fast through this. 2, 3, you get the idea. We do this all the way up to 8. So it looks something like this when you're done, and then the semicolon at the end. So that just means that when we're at the smaller sizes, all of those areas are set up, and then those areas also exist here. And the reason we want to do that is then on each one of these, we can just say that my grid area is 1. And even though when we declare our grid areas, we use quotations, here we don't use them. We just put 1. And then in this one, I would say that my grid area is 2. And save right there, and you can see the difference it makes. When we're at the smaller sizes, they're going where they should be. And when we get to the bigger sizes, look at that. This one is going across those 2 columns now. And then we can come on this one, same thing. I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to watch me do this for all of them. But we'll do this one last one. Grid area is 3. Hit save, and now we have a different one, and they've sort of shuffled around. It's sort of breaking things right now, but once we have all of them set up, it should be perfect. And there we go. I just hit save on my grid area 8, and you can see that we have the 8 areas coming together. And if we come and look here, everything is in the right spot. We have some issues, but everything is where we want it to be in terms of grid, in terms of the way things are lining up with one another. Though there are clearly some issues. One of the issues is being caused by this guy down here, where we actually need this to be 2 columns. And it's not 2 columns, we have 1 column, so it's actually making everything in the grid bigger than it should actually be. I also think that larger font size that I put on here is potentially way too big. It looked okay at the smaller sizes, but I'm going to make a little tweak there. We're going to find a bit of a middle ground for that, just because I'm looking here and this font size is way too big for sure. So on it was in my custom properties, this one will drop it down maybe to a 1.5. I think that'd be closer to what we actually want. But yeah, the first thing I'm going to look at fixing is this one. We're going to play with the padding on some of these a little bit. And then I think things are going to come together better than what they were before. And we're also going to have to make adjustments to some of these images to get them working properly as well. So let's go and tackle that. This is the nice thing with the grid inspector is it says the number. So I can look up my 5 for my, I'm just doing a quick search here. There we go. My nth child 5 is what I was looking for. And when I'm in that one, what I can do is just come in with that media query again. Media, our width is greater than 960 pixels. And what we want to do is then we can make some changes. So the first thing we want to change is actually say that we have grid template columns. And if I look at the layout that we've lost there because of the autocomplete, this side looks a little bit bigger than that side. For now, we might adjust this, but maybe it's like a 2FR, 1FR. I don't know if that's the exact number we want, but at least we get our 2 columns that are coming in. I'm also going to close my inspector for now, just so we can see things like this and move my head out of the way. So that looks a little bit better, but now of course we also need to make some other changes here. And this is another thing I like about custom properties is I can come into here and I can just say like, actually now in this situation, I need my Bento card horizontal alignment to now be start, and that can fix those over there. I'm saying 2FR, 1FR. I think just both of them being 1FR, that looks a little bit better, right? So we'll stick with that. I think my gap is way too big, so that was my Bento card gap. Can probably come way down right now. Let's just say that it's going to be 16 pixels. My image size can be changed now as well. So that would be my Bento card image size. We'll try 100% and see what that gives us. Except that shouldn't be size, it should be width. I probably should have used size actually. That looks better. So I'll go with that. And then the last thing I'm going to do on here is my Bento card vertical alignment now, which can be center. And that's not working, even though it should. So let's go take a look at where I set that up originally, which was all the way up. That's too far, actually. Here, the Bento grid, this one right here, I did align content and justify items. And I said, if you weren't sure, I think this should actually be align items and not content. And now that one is vertical right there. And that one is set to start. That we also, okay, so we have the align items. I'm just thinking, because this is not what we want here. And that would be right here. We're at this align content and justify items. I mentioned I have a video that's looking at the two of them, and I'm getting it wrong. But I think the problem is if I did this as an align items, it would fix this one but break other ones, right? Yeah. So you can see the spacing here, like where my head was, is now spacing everything out, because when we do an align items, it's going to center each item within the grid, but the grid is actually filling up all the available space there. I could go on the parent and make a change there, or we can do an align self start here, or I think the easiest thing to do, since we already have this, is actually duplicate this one that we already have, and then if I just have this one as both in align items and in align content, it's working down here now, and it's also working up here. So I think that's probably the best solution for this specific use case. You wouldn't want to do this all the time, but I think it makes sense to do that here, because that's working for this. I can't think of a situation where that wouldn't work, actually. And so, yeah, that fixed this issue down here. So let's keep on going through this. The order here is going to muck me up. But just looking over here, I think we want the same thing on this one, and I remember that was number 7, just because we pointed that one out really early on. So let's come down here. We're going to bring in the same media query at media. We're going to use this a few times, so I'm going to copy paste it. But we'll say the width is greater than 960 pixels, and we're going to say that the Bento grid vertical alignment is center on this one as well, except it's Bento card, not Bento grid. There we go. We've centered that, and the image on this one. So that'd be my Bento card image size is probably closer to 100%. And I put size. I really should rename it size instead of width, because that's how I always say things, and I should use an inline size instead of a width on there. But there we go. That looks better as well when we compare it to this. I know this is small, but it's getting us sort of the good idea. This one I think is our 4. Let's go try. I'm going to guess that's our 4. And actually, let's go copy this so I remember that we don't have to keep writing it over and over. Let's go find out if that's our 4. We're just going to throw this on there and see what happens. Not our 4. Okay, this one I think is our 4. Yeah, that was our 4. So let's do an inspect on here, and we have our area. That's our number 2. Okay, completely wrong guess. That's okay. We can come up to here on my 2, and we can say that the image width actually it's probably much bigger, and we don't need the vertical alignment. Because here, if we make this bigger, we'll see the image should actually be overflowing here. So we need that image to be a lot bigger. So let's try 150. Not bad. I'm going to stick with that. I'm happy with how that looks. Awesome. Cool. That one's good. This one actually is looking, actually the card, that one should be a bit bigger. So that was 2. So that would be our 3rd one here. So I'll just do it right here. Actually, I just realized we have this image that has the size on it. Okay, is it only the image that's changing size? It is, so we could put that media query in here, I guess, and this would be 100%. Good, that looks pretty good. Oh wait, the height of it is way off now though, so we actually want to change the margin bottom of this one to pull it in a lot more. Right, because we only see the check marks along the top there. So maybe like 125. That looks a bit better, and it balances this whole area out a little bit more. Because yeah, we only see those check marks coming through. So I'll do that. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna also, like right now, I just want to say really fast, I'm doing this on nth child 3, which would mean if I move these into different places, it would potentially break the layout and other things. I'll mention why I'm doing it this way a little bit later when we talk about reordering things as well. If we look at this one, it's also really broken. Let me move myself out of the way because we'll do that one next, which is probably number 8. One way to find out. Background is red. Oh no, that's not 8. 8's over there. Actually, we need to fix 8 anyway. So while we're here, we can paste in that same media query. We can get that same media query and paste it in right here. Actually, there we go. Problem solved. Done. Width 100%. Actually, I'm wondering if the width should be a little bit bigger. Yeah, I think the width should be a little bit bigger, like 110. Whoops, 110 or 105 maybe. We'll try 110. That's probably closer to what we want, right? Like it's getting closer on that side than that side. Maybe a 105 would be more in line with what we want. But that type of thing where it's a little bit bigger on one side than the other. And actually, I don't think we have the center on there. It should actually be staying at the top. The bottom should be lower down. Okay, yeah. So let's go and find this one right here, which... Is it this one? Nope. And it's not 8 either? 8 was this one. This one is our 4. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, 4 is all the way over there. Let's go back up then. So our 4, we can get that media query coming in. And in this case, we do want to have it centered, I guess, because it looks like it's higher off the top. So I am going to leave that centering on there. The image needs to be a lot bigger, which I think is going to help with some of the spacing just to make it a bit more consistent. And there's also... we need it left aligned. So the Bento card horizontal alignment will be start, which will push everything over, which is good. And then the image size is much bigger. I think it's even bigger than that. 175 maybe, 180. And you don't have to use percentages. I think I mentioned that earlier, but yeah, that gives us the 5 of them that we can see on the design here, and it actually fills up the space much better than what we had a little bit earlier. So I'm happy with that. You know what though? I do think my text sizes are wrong, and I think the max size on this image is bad. So let's go fix that max size on that image first of all. I think it was okay at the smaller size. Let's come here first actually. I'm going to drop this down to a 2.5. I think that actually... this one looks better. This actually now is on 1 line because I think that was on 2 before. So that's going on to 1 line. That works better. That looks better. This one looks kind of small, but I actually think it's about what we want. So when I made it bigger before, I think that was a mistake. And what I actually should have done was on that first one, maybe we come in with the media query here and we just say that the max width here could be almost like 50%, right? Something like that, 45%. And I'm just doing this in the media query because again, I think it was okay. I think that looks a lot better. Yeah, there we go. That looks much more in line. This is working better. I'm happy with that. Cool. So yeah, that I'm happy with. So let's just look quick. This one looks good. Good, good. Good, good, good. This one's good. This one's good. Oh, the image here. This one, the image on this one needs to be bigger. And then I think we're done. So let's go take a look at that. Then we're done, but we're not done because that's number 6. Because I do want to talk about the alignment of things and moving, or not alignment, but moving things around. So I'm just going to take the image width of 100%. I'm actually going to move this up to here. And if I look, 100% might be a little bit too big. We'll try like an 80. Yeah, that looks good. My spacing's a bit off. I think we have a little bit of a problem with this one being too tall. Or I think my padding's too big. I think it really is the padding on that one. Is too much, right? Because if we look, the padding looks a bit tighter. And again, maybe my overall card padding, looking at all of them, might be a little bit big, but I don't mind. Like this one, it actually looks pretty good. I think this one, they're lining up though, and they're lining up here. I'm going to leave it. I don't mind that there's a bit of extra space at the bottom. I think that's fine. I just thought of something. I was in time, but I will talk about that now actually, while we're doing this part, because this middle ground is terrible. This follows more or less our layout. The very small size is okay, but this middle ground is like really, really bad. So part of the issue though is we're reordering things, right? Like even when I didn't know what number this was, and it was that our 7 that's going there or something, that's weird. So when you are reordering things, you do want to be really, really careful with it. In this case, we can sort of get away with it because nothing's focusable, and we're just following what our designers wanted. And with a bento grid like this, you're just sort of mixing and matching and placing things, which is also why I'm fine using the nth child and just placing this element exactly in this one spot with these specific colors and all these things, instead of using like a whole bunch of utility classes, let's say, to get everything how I want it to be. And that's just because with a bento grid like this, everything has its very specific place that it has to be in. So I'm completely fine doing it this way. If this was basically any other type of layout, this would probably be a bit of a dangerous approach, but I think it's a fun thing that we can learn how to use our custom properties in the way that we're doing here, where we're setting them all up and then overriding them, and then we can even affect the heading levels because we have the heading things that were set up over here, and just we can create this more composable layouts, which is always good. Sometimes you might do that with nth child. In other layouts, you might do that with just a class on each one of them, and then you can do the exact same type of manipulation. There's a whole bunch of different approaches that you can take to using what we've been using here. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and even if this isn't exactly how you might build a lot of layouts, I think for bento it's completely fine. And with certain other layouts too, I think you can get away with it, but you want to be careful and just think about it a little bit. For this middle ground though, we will take this and paste this in. And yeah, the other part there that I was talking about was just on the ordering of things. When we are putting a 7 here, like this order makes sense. And then we're taking a 7, putting it here, but nothing here is focusable. So I think it's okay you can do that. If anything in here was focusable and the order starts jumping randomly when you start reordering things, that becomes problematic because people do keyboard navigate through a lot of different ways, and they tab between things. And if the order doesn't make sense, it's an issue, I should say. And this is like the order that matters. The order that's in the HTML is the order that it is in your document. So just that's what you want to be paying attention to the most. Put these in the logical order. Don't put this, because at desktop it's the first one, doesn't mean it should be the first one here. That's why I looked at the mobile layout when I first did it, because they all just stacked in order. And this is basically the title, so that also made sense for it to be the first one there. Okay, so let's fix this at medium screen sizes. So medium, I'm gonna try 660, and we'll see if that works. And I think we'll keep this one all the way at the top, so we can have a 1 going all the way across the top. Then let's just make this a bit smaller so this can kick in. There we go. Where is it? There it is. I don't know where it's happening. We'll see in a second. We have to rearrange some of these other ones. So 7, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. So I think what we'll do is 7. Let's just do a 2, 3. And then we could do a 4, 5, and then 7, 8. Let's see what that gives us. So that should be, here we go, there we go. Something's broken though. Oh, we have this guy all by itself down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we don't have a 6. So let's look at this. Can we rearrange anything here ourselves? I think this one's a tiny one. This one I think could work too, because it's getting small now. It's breaking this a little bit. Let's do, that's my 3. So let's do a 4, 6 and see what that gives us. That looks okay, right? So we get the big one across the top. These two work well next to each other. This works okay. Do we have a taller one? I think that's the tallest one, right? I'm not, and this could be centered vertically here too. So we could do a little bit of fixing up potentially. Maybe we switch those two around too, actually. Let's make this one 5 and make this one 7. Ooh, that works better. There we go. That works a lot better. I'm happy with that. Everything's squeezed in a little bit better. Perfect. I'm going to leave it like that. So we get the stacked layout in the order that it is in the DOM, which makes the most sense. Then we get to this layout where it breaks over 2 columns, just with this taking up the entire top. Because this one's tall, we can squeeze those in there. and then eventually we hit that 4-column layout, and we could always play with the breakpoint or something else along the way there. So yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you do want to go more into that alignment, align items, justify items, align content, justify content that I talked about earlier, and you want to check out that video, it is right here for your viewing pleasure. And with that, I would like to thank my enablers of awesome, Andrew, Simon, and Tim, as well as all my other patrons and channel members for their monthly support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.